Hello Animals fans and welcome back to AniLysis. Today we're looking at the mountains. And this is a lovely picture of Midway Mountain, which is in the Sequoia, or on the edge of the Sequoia National Forest in California. Right, the mountains. It's used a few times. And it's first used in this book. Book 3, The Encounter. Let's see... What? What? Let's have a first mysterious quote. Don't know what that even means, but here it comes. Brace yourself. Bah, coming at you. Oh, Lila. I want to find out what it's doing, I said. The first time, I had the feeling it was heading away from the mountains. The second time, it was doing just the opposite. It was flying too low to make it over the mountains, so I'm guessing it was doing something in the mountains. Rachel nodded. That makes sense. Marco rolled his eyes. The mountains? Have you suburb dwellers ever been to the mountains? We're talking about a large area. No matter how big this ship is, it could hide in 1,000 places in the mountains. And that's our first real introduction to the mountains. So Tobias has seen this truck ship, which you've done a previous AniLysis on, going over toward the mountains and settling down in there somewhere. But as Marco says, this is a massive area, so much so that you could fill 1,000 odd of these massive ships in there. And yes, it is pretty big, as we will get onto. Let's have a look at a few more quotes that describe the blob that is the mountains. Before we get too far into it though, let's just explain that the mountains covers a wide array of areas in the Animorphs series. So, and because it's so vast, it's going to be quite vague, this one. And as per usual, quite a fair bit of speculation. But yeah, let's look at some quotes now, just describing the location itself, the size, the scope, and then we'll look at seeing if we can draw some sort of map. It's going to be difficult, I tell you. The forest is huge. It reaches all the way back up into the mountains. Thousands, maybe millions of square miles of pines and oaks and a scattering of birch trees sweep down from the mountains all the way to the edges of town. Our farm is right on the edge. Lots of farms are, and some new housing developments and so on. It was a clear evening, so the mountains showed up pink and lavender in the setting sun. We were a strange little parade. After an hour we had reached the lower foothills of the mountains, and for the last 2 hours we'd been climbing up those hills, up and up. I waited atop the mountain, alone, king of the world. From the peak, the backside of the mountain extended almost flat toward the west. All I saw was a long slope that extended perhaps 1/4 of a mile before seeming to be broken by the spine of a ridge. We had come up the east face, a nearly sheer drop. The southeast and northeast were no better, sheer cliffs. A fatal fall in 3 directions. A fatal fall for a human, or human controller. Nothing that looked remotely like a hidden valley. Nothing that looked remotely like a secret Hork-Bajir colony. But then, that was to be expected. It wasn't even noon yet, but the sun was already bright. It was going to be hot, that was for sure. I almost envied Rachel heading up to the mountains. It would probably be cooler up there. The trees extended in a long sweep right, from the farmland up into the far distant mountains. With my hawk's vision, I could even see the snow on those far off peaks. Where are we? She shook her head. I don't know. We were in the river for a long time. I was knocked out too, but I came to sooner than you, and I was able to grab onto a floating log for part of the time. I looked round. The trees were very tall, mostly pines. I saw no obvious trails, no trash or other signs of humans. We were deep in the forest. I tried to form a mental picture of the course of the river. I knew it came down from the mountains, fed by melting snow and rain. It swept very near our farm, then doubled back, heading toward the mountains until the slope changed again and turned it at last toward the sea. But that didn't tell me where we were. We could be a mile from civilization, or we could be 10 miles. But more troubling was that I didn't know what direction to go. If we went the right way, we might hit a road pretty soon. If we went the wrong way, Well, the forest was very large. You could be lost in the forest for a long, long time. So those are the descriptions of location, climate, size. So let's take all those bits of information and look at drawing ourselves a little picture. Now I suppose the first thing we want to do is establish the positions of everything. We suspect that the animals are in California. Problem is, you look at one of those quotes where it's talking about Marco climbing the mountains in the reunion, and it says he climbs the east side and he looks over the back of the mountain, which faces off towards the west, and it slopes off to the west. So that's the coast, and this is the sea, as is plainly obvious from the blueness. Here is the town and all the homeless people. Then you have the forest and the woodlands, basically the foothills of the mountains. And over here then is the mountains. So if they're in California, that's what you'd expect. So the animals would be, I don't know, this orange blob here. The sea is to their west and the mountains to the east. So if Marco's over here in the mountains, so say we've got this mountain here. That looks like a good mountain, quite happy with that. Marco has climbed up this side and is looking over the mountain out to the west. What's strange about this is that he calls that side the back of the mountain. Surely, oh, I've dropped my pen. Surely, if you live over here, you're coming from that direction, you're thinking that's the back of the mountain, facing off that direction. Would you not? Surely. So what appears to have happened is in the reunion, they've come, assuming they're in California, like literally California, not some made up place. They've come here, they've come around the back of the mountain, and they've ascended on the east side and looked out over the west, which would be towards the sea, which isn't mentioned in the site. But why would they call that the back of the mountain? Unless that's just relative to where they climbed it, but still, it doesn't explain why they've come around the mountain to climb up, rather than just going up the mountain. What does this tell us? It tells us that it's probably like that. I've horizontally flipped the image. What does that tell us? It tells us that perhaps the Animorphs aren't actually in California. Oh, shut up, Lila. What are you meowing at? It's not that controversial, is it? You're gonna come beat me up? Well, good luck, because I'm the master of karate. You don't give a damn, do you? Anyway, so I'm going to go with that assumption and just assume that it is based on California, but the town is back to the geography is back to front. Up here, you've got snow-covered peaks. It's cooler up there because you're going uphill, as was described in the quotes. And between the mountains that we're discussing is the foothills, which is covered in pine trees and whatever trees did they say? Pines and oaks and a scattering of birch trees. And that's all down in the middle in here. And there's also lakes in these mountains. And we can pretty sure that there's multiple lakes. Okay? So one of these lakes, let's say a lake over here, was from Book 3, The Encounter. And the mountain range goes pretty far back. You know, it's not just this one little mountain here. We're talking mountains spread all out that way. I'm not going to draw it all for you. One other thing that's mentioned in those quotes we had earlier is the roads. There are road systems, but not many. And we've seen characters drive up these roads before. Visser drove like a madwoman. The Audi tore around the hairpin mountain curves at speeds that would have been high on a freeway. Then, down below, I saw something that caught my attention. There was a convoy of trucks and jeeps moving along a narrow, snaking dirt road. Maybe 5 vehicles. They had the markings of the park service, but they seemed to be in a big hurry. They drove to a lake that I had just glimpsed up ahead. By the shore of the lake, they pulled off the road. Then, to my surprise, several dozen uniformed men jumped from the trucks and began to fan out through the woods. So these mountains have the usual roads snaking through them. Infrequently, but they are still there. Obviously, you've got to get from point A to point B. And there's park rangers, apparently. So this is some sort of national park, we would assume. That's the implication of that. If there are park rangers, they're not going to come from the local playground park, are they? They're going to be based in this mountainous area. So these mountains are probably some sort of national park. What that means in the US, I'm not too sure, but it must fall under various protections, like you can't just build an estate there, I don't know. But one of the things that we see there as well is the lake, the big lake that we see in Book 3. What else do we have around this lake? Let's look at this particular lake. And keep in mind that there are probably quite a few more lakes than just this one. The 2 choppers circled the lake. Then they landed in a small clearing at the far side of the lake at the same time. So let me get this straight, Tobias, Marco said. You're taking us to a bear cave, as in big grizzly bears, and this is a good thing? Not grizzlies, Cassie interrupted. Not in this area. We'd be talking black bears. They're much smaller. Swell. I'm totally reassured. Just a small bear cave. Look, it's close to the lake, but I don't think the Yerks know about it, I said. Sorry, but there wasn't a convenient Marriott hotel where I could get you a room for the night. This lake where the truck ship is has a bear cave and a small clearing, but it's also bordered by woodland. There's the lake, and consider it's probably quite a big lake as well. And you've probably got along a considerable amount of the side of it is all woodland, which is all these bits here. And then you've got a clearing, I'm imagining, like around here, this side. And leading up to that clearing or around the clearing is probably like a road. And this convoy like comes in here. That's my convoy. There it is. And then the truck ship will... How's that shaped again? It's like a stingray, isn't it? That's a stingray, isn't it? But that sits over the lake like that. There's the convoy. And the bear cave can be like over here. So that's where the bear lives. And so the animals come to this bit, hide in there. And that's where they eventually go as trouts and get thrown into the lake. That's how I'm picturing this mountain lake to look. But there's probably not that much detail. Well, there isn't that much detail to throw in other than the basics of what that is. Do we ever come across this lake again? Potentially. The lake is in the mountains. It's a long way from where any of us live. And if we'd had to walk it, it would have taken several days. Fortunately, we didn't have to walk. Grandpa G's cabin was the only house on the lake. His closest neighbour had been Mrs. Malloy, and she lived 7 miles away, halfway to town. The only other house around was an old abandoned hunting lodge across the lake. No cable, no Taco Bell, no streetlights or crowds, no movies, no malls. Now I understand that last one there with Grandpa G didn't mention mountains, but this extra quote adds the context to it. So what's the plan? How do we follow you guys up to the mountains? We leave at noon. We were supposed to leave earlier, but my dad has some stuff to do this morning. I'll meet you all at Cassie's barn at 9 to set the plans. So there are 2 lakes. One of them we could be pretty certain, definitely certain, I'm saying 99%, sure isn't the one we saw in Book 3. And that is Grandpa G's lake outside his house. I'm pretty certain that's not the same lake as we saw in Book 3. The other one from the Android, where the Sharing have their water skiing event, I believe we've got another quote for that later, But yeah, that's where they go for a water skiing event. Is that the same lake as in book 3? Possibly. Possibly. I don't think we have any clues as to whether it is, but I'm going to predict it's not. Because there's probably quite a lot of lakes in these mountains. And so the odds of it being the same lake, probably pretty slim, but I'm not going to say it's impossible. Anyway, another clue as to why Grandpa G's lake is not the lake we talk about here is the distance. My family had driven 8 hours to visit him in his cabin in the woods. He and I were sitting on the dock at the lake, watching the fish snatch mosquitoes off the water's glassy, mirrored surface. And it was so quiet. Quiet enough to make me wish I was home with the TV blasting and my dog Homer gnawing on a rawhide chew. 8 hours drive. Long time. You could probably travel the vast majority from one length. How far could you travel? Probably travel from the southernest point of England to almost the top of Scotland in that time. But that's the UK. Let's look at California, where the animals are potentially not based, but what people think of as being based there. You'll notice here I have the map of the United States here. There's a blue line here that covers 523 miles, for which it would take just over 8 hours to travel. That is from San Diego to San Francisco. It took Jake's family 8 hours to travel from their home to Grandpa G's cabin in the forest. Now you could say, well, yeah, 8 hours, but you're also on like freeways. So what if you're traveling into the woods? It shouldn't be as far a distance. A lot of people say that Ventura is a likely spot for the Animorphs to be based. So I've gone for something like this. So Ventura to a place called Truckee, which is by a big lake, Lake Tahoe. But it's just this little place in the middle of a national forest. So you've got all your forest roads here. And that takes 7.5 hours. But look at the distance. It's like most of California you're travelling. And that's how far Jake had to travel. So, is this even the same set of mountains? It's suggested that it is, because it just says, how long till we get up to the mountains? Not those other mountains, or specific mountain X, specific mountain area Y. No, it's just the mountains, like we've discussed before, the mountains. It's like, okay, I live between, no, not between. Let's go for, instead of going between. So I live there, there's Plymouth, there's Bristol. Me, Plymouth, Bristol. So if I were to say I'm going to the city, I would go to Plymouth. I wouldn't go to Bristol. I would say specifically Bristol. Because when I say city, I mean the nearest city to me. That's what I'm talking about. Do you get what I'm saying? So them just saying, let's go up to the mountains to see Grandpa G. When you know that there's a series of mountains like round here. So what that suggests to me is that this is all the same mountain range, just further in. So let's bring up the handy dandy drawing pad again. We've got the sea over here. Then you have the Los Angeles and homeless people thing. Then all of this is the forests and mountains, okay? So the mountains we saw earlier that the animals were involved in are here. So let's do that again. That's the mountains that they did the reunion on, and the lake from book 3 is here. The water skiing lake can be, I don't know, here. Grandpa G lives in the same mountain area, but he's over here. 8 hours away. 8 hours by car. That's a car. So what I'm trying to say here is, this mountain range, as Marco said at the start of the video, is vast. It's more than vast. It's massive. You got to remember as well, we've got dry lands somewhere. The dry lands can be, I don't know, basically like a desert. That can be like over here or something, I don't know, stretching off up that way. Dry. But I think what we have to remember, let's be honest, it is fiction, and they probably didn't sit down and think, right, what's the geography of this mountain range? Maybe they did. I don't think they did. But I'm here to be Dr. Nitpick, okay? So just bear with me. And no, I don't have a bear with me. I mean, bear... And now we have to throw another spanner into the mix with a couple more random little bits that I didn't know where else to fit in this video, so I'm just going to put them in now. And it's regarding a golden eagle habitat and Visser 3's new feeding pasture from book 37. Tobias led us to the Visser's new temporary feeding pasture. The pasture was really a small valley, tucked away in the foothills of the mountains. Charming, lush green grass, bright yellow wildflowers, soft breezes. "What are you doing with that?" he demanded, glaring at the eagle. Relax, Tobias," Cassie said, setting down the cage. "You're not releasing him near my territory," he said flatly. "Tobias, this bird has only been at the centre for a couple of days. He has a well-established territory well back in the mountains. You know golden eagles don't like roosting in trees if they can find a nice cliff, so he won't be hanging around. But we can't get him any closer to his territory, really, because the road back up there is washed out." Yeah, just a couple of little details additional in there. So there's a golden eagle, they like cliffs, so lives on a cliff edge somewhere in the mountains. So just put that in your mental image, just a little golden eagle sitting there doing that. And the other bit, Visser 3's feeding pasture, was in the foothills of the mountains. So yeah, somewhere like that. Visser 3's hoofing around, you know. But that's book 37, so let's just carry on. Now, we haven't actually spoken about one of the most important parts of the mountain yet. You might already be yelling at your screen, "For God's sake, Adam, get on to the important!" And I say to you, whoa, let's do it now. Straight ahead, a ravine 100 feet deep. It was like it had been cut with a knife, like someone had slashed the earth and made a cut so deep you could throw a skyscraper down it. The ravine was narrow, no more than 40 feet across. At the bottom, I knew, was a rushing stream. In spring it would swell with melting ice from the mountains, but now the stream was narrow, leaving wide, sandy banks on either side. What's this ravine relate to? Well, we're talking Hort-Bajir now. The Hort-Bajir Valley. I've just remembered that I've missed something. Oh, we'll cover it at the end. About the river, okay? And how it doubles back, but we'll get onto that. The ravine is basically cut through this mountain range, sort of near where the animals are based, so on that side of the mountain range. And that's where the Hort-Bajir, Jarahami and Ket Halpak fake their own deaths, and they are then taken to the Hort-Bajir Valley. Hello, this is Earth, Marco said. There is no safe place for an alien that looks like a mix of a gargoyle and a lawnmower. Yes, there is, I said. 4 human heads and 1 ant-like set of stalk eyes all turned to stare up at me. Where? Rachel asked. I know a place. Way up in the mountains. A valley. There are caves and fresh water streams. It's hidden. We had all been driven from our homes. We had lost all vestiges of a normal life. We now hid with the free Hort-Bajir in a valley deep in the mountains. So, I haven't mentioned it before, but the mountains is where the animals end up hiding out. So, it's actually vital to the story, this mountain range. And that's 2 Hort-Bajir valleys, by the way. So, you got the first one the Ellimist set up, in quotations. Inverted, whatever. He sets that one up, and then that gets destroyed in book 47. And the Hort-Bajir move. They migrate to some other valley, where the animals join them in hiding, but those are both in the mountains. So, and we don't know where. It's not specified where, and we're supposedly not allowed to see it because of the Ellimist trickery. There might be in another dimension of the mountains, but whatever. We're not going to go into the Hortbajir Valley in this video. That's going to be a separate analysis, so we're just going to leave it at that. So tune in for that analysis when that eventually comes along. Let's just talk about a few other things now about the mountains. So there's a lot of human activity on the mountains. Even though it's largely deserted, there are still spatterings of human activity. Let's look at some quotes. Hortbajir? Cassie asked shakily. You're sure? Oh yeah, I said. It's kind of hard to confuse them with anything else. The park rangers are clearing out the area around the lake. They hustled some campers out of there real fast, at gunpoint. It's just this stupid 2-day gymnastics camp I signed up for a long time ago, Rachel was saying. It's no big deal. It's something I was going to do back, before. What is Rachel doing out there? Jake demanded. She's supposed to be up in the mountains at that camp. I headed for the clearing halfway up the mountain. There was a cluster of lean-tos for campers on the edge of the clearing. Axe, using his morphing ability, should already have frightened them from the area. Marco found out the showing is having a little water skiing thing up that lake, Jake said. Yeah, there you go. I told you there'd be something about the water skiing event at the lake. There's a lot of camping stuff, and Rachel's gymnastics camp apparently goes up at the mountains. Yeah, basically it's this big woo-waha happy days area, these mountain places. And yeah, just occasionally people pop up there, mostly campers and hikers and all that sort of stuff, like the Star Trek fans in 47. And we'll get onto them in different analysis at some point as well. But yeah, it's your typical mountain range. There's not much else I can say about it. Oh yeah, apart from the bits that were destroyed. An explosion like a bomb going off. The truck ship had hit the ground. The concussion rolled us over like a tidal wave of air. I rocketed into a tree, but was able to avoid being hurt. Everyone okay? I yelled. One by one they said yes. But the explosion had disturbed every animal in the forest. The birds had all either hidden or flown away during the earlier fighting. The Yerk truck ship burned. What was left was eliminated by the Yerks. No evidence was left behind. No proof that we could show to the world. Eric the Chi had created the illusion, and now, as the Yerks fired, he created the illusion of Hortbajir burning, falling, dying. But the laws of physics could not be denied. The massive Dracon energies were not descending deep into a valley. They were hitting the mountain peak, only 100 feet from us. Crack! The ground shuddered, and suddenly the ground was falling away. A crack in the very rock itself. A huge fissure opened up. So not only did the animals visit the mountains on a few occasions, but they also destroyed a few bits of it. Not much, thankfully. And considering the vastness of this mountain range, as we've discovered, they didn't leave that much of a scar on the place, to be fair. But yeah, that's pretty much the mountains. It's very vague, largely, because it's a mountain range. I'm not going to describe each individual freaking tree to you, nor does the book series attempt to either. So let's just go over the look of it to finish off this video, because there is one thing I forgot. I want to do it a bit more clearly. So I'm thinking that actually the sea is on the east of the Animorphs' hometown. So there's the sea. There's the town. So yeah, that's where the Animorphs live. Let's draw the Animorphs symbol. There you go. Animorphs' hometown. You can. That's easy to tell apart, isn't it? And then you have, say, the forest, which stretches up there. Forest / woodland, because it seems to be interchangeable. And then over here, stretching out that way, is the mountain range, filled with various lakes and what have you. So that's what I'm thinking. And it does take a while for the Animorphs to go there, and then further to get to Grandpa G. But obviously they're in Morph a lot of the time, so it doesn't take as long as it potentially could, but still quite a long time. The one thing I forgot to do in the last one was talk about this river. Because apparently, right, let's say Cassie's barn is around this area here. Because she's on the edge of town, we can be pretty certain about that. and it borders the forest. So as soon as you exit Cassie's land, you hit this area, trees and woodlands and what have you. The river supposedly runs from the mountains, comes down to the forest, then turns back towards the mountains, and then comes back to sea. So that's probably why when Cassie and Karen were stranded out here, they didn't know if they were here or here. So even if Cassie knew that this was west and this was east, you know, she's here, then if she travels westward along the river, she's going to make it back to the town, but in a long time. Or if she's here and she heads west, she ends up at the mountains. You'd then assume that she should just travel east, but this is just based, you know, this isn't accurate. just be lenient on me, please. That goes for you too, Medi. So yeah, that's largely how I see it. That's how it's given to us, and I think it makes sense in context of everything we know. I think. Do you agree with me? Please do. I'm so lonely with these opinions. Thank you very much for watching. It's been tiddling good entertainment. Let's have a gander at what's next on the old chopping block, shall we? We are going to spin the wheel. Once again, we've got options from book 1 all the way up to book 18, including the Andalite Chronicles, Megamorphs 1, and Alternamorphs 1. Next up, I'm going to be listening to the audiobook for Megamorphs 2, and so that will go into the list. But for now, we're dealing with the other ones. Spinning, spinning, spinning. And what's it going to be? Who are we having next time? Bang! It is Naomi's mother, parentheses, Rachel's grandmother. I don't even remember which book she was mentioned in, honestly, but that's who we're covering. Now, tune in for that one. The thing is with this spin the wheel method, it means that, you know, everything's got an equal opportunity of turning up. Whereas before, I was doing a roll of dice, which would tell me which book and which page. And I go to that page, and the first thing that turns up, I do that. Which meant that things that turned up more frequently in the books were more likely to appear. Whereas this method is, everything's got an equal chance of turning up. So you're more likely to get obscure options showing up. But hey, I think it's more fun because you get to see me do it. But yeah, Naomi's mother comes next. Thank you very much for watching. Tatty bye, and ta-ra. See you next time somewhere in the Animals universe. Go have your dinner. Go on me. Have a pint as well. See you later. See you later. God damn it, Lila.